Hi, I'm Aaron Hill, Vice President of Client Services here at Sawtooth Software. Today, we're going to review some of the features of the Sawtooth Software Choice Simulator. This will be a quick demonstration of some of the features. We won't get into a lot of the details as far as how to create the simulation package, but we will show you some of the basic features so you can get a feel for what the simulator is capable of. Starting out, we're going to assume that we're in demo mode here. I've got a license installed, but if you're coming in for a demo of the software, you're going to come in here without a license, so you're going to want to say that you're an end client. This will allow you to open up some of the demonstration projects that we have available for you. There's some screens here at the beginning that you can go through that talk about how to create projects, how to open up a project. We're going to skip those though, and I'll just show you how it's done. So in our tour today, we're going to go up here to the Help button where you can view the documentation. You can submit feedback. So if you see anything wrong with the software, you can let us know really easily. We're going to go today down to Samples, and we're going to look at this golf exercise. We're going to do the client package so you can see things as an end user might see it. So this would be a simulator that you might receive from a market research vendor or somebody else in your organization that may have done a project. So we'll click on Golf Client Package, and the simulator will load up a basic simulator that's been sort of set up for us. So you can see that we've got two scenarios already set up here for us that show different products. So we've got a High Flyer Pro. In this study, we had three different attributes that we studied. So we studied brands. So there's 4 different brands, 3 levels of performance, how far the ball flies farther than what a normal golf ball would fly. And then we've got 4 different levels of price. So our analyst may have already set up these products for us. So we've got scenario 1 where we've got a High Flyer Pro, a Long Shot, and a Magnum Force with these performance characteristics and these prices. If we look at scenario 2, we have a similar thing, but we've got slightly different pricing, and we've got different brands involved in scenario 2. Now, what this simulation does is it allows us to essentially say, hey, if a golfer goes into a shop and they see these 3 golf balls on the shelf, which one are they going to buy? Or which one would they prefer to buy is more technically correct. And so when we set this up, we can now click on the Simulate button, and it runs through. In this case, we've got 250 respondents in our survey. And for each of those respondents, it's then gone through and looked at their utility model and said, okay, well, given what they prefer, which of these products would they choose? So 30.9% of our respondents would have chosen this High Flyer Pro golf ball. 28% of them would have preferred this Long Shot golf ball. 21% of them would have preferred this Magnum Force golf ball. And then we had a none option in this study, so we're also going to simulate the percentage of people that walked out of the store without buying anything. 27.6% of the people would have walked out without buying any of the golf balls. And you can see that it comes up with a nice little graph over here that shows what the outputs would be. So if we want to highlight our particular brand, we can have it separate that piece of the pie out. We can change how we graph these things, so we can do a bar chart, or a horizontal bar chart or vertical bar chart. In each case, we can mouse over to see what the preferences were for each of the golf balls that we studied today. All right, so that's basic simulation. So if I was coming into this new, I might come in with a blank scenario. So if we click this Add button up here, we can create a new scenario. And so maybe I want to start out with Long Shot. So our brand is going to be Long Shot. So I can select my brand from the list. I can select my performance from the list. So maybe Long Shot goes 15 yards farther than the average ball. And for price, maybe it's $8.99. And then maybe we want to add a second one that's High Flyer Pro. And so its brand is High Flyer Pro, and maybe it only goes 10 yards farther, but maybe this is a premium ball, and so it actually costs more because it's a known brand on the market. So I can put in just 2 products if I want to, click the simulate, and see what happens. So in this case, again, 30% would pick the long shot that's lower price but higher performance. 36% would pick the high flyer because it has greater brand recognition, even though it's lower performance and a higher price. And then 32% would pick the none. Well, suppose that we were coming in with a new product in the market, and we wanted to look at what would happen if we introduce a new product to the market. So we can come in here and we can say, okay, well, let's do a new product called Eclipse. And maybe we don't think we can go as far as these other balls, but we can manufacture them for a lot cheaper. So let's go in and put our price at $4.99. So before we had market shares of 30 and 36%. Now that we've added this new product, we can see that if we could get this on the shelf, the other products drop to 21 and 26%, and Eclipse captures 23% of the market. We've got a few more people that aren't selecting the none, so now they're buying into these products. And so we can see how Eclipse could do at the market with this particular configuration of performance and price. We can also look at it by segment. So I can go into my scenario settings up here at the top, and this is just for this my scenario that I just created here. And I can tell it that I want to look at this by segments. So I've got a segment called gender loaded in here, and I can click that gender segment. And then when I click simulate, it runs, and not only does it give me the results for long shot and high flyer and Eclipse, but it breaks it out by females and males. So I can see if there's differences in preference for golf balls depending on whether you're a female golfer or a male golfer. And it looks like male golfers look like maybe they're a little bit less likely to buy long shot, a little more likely to walk out without buying anything. So we can look at differences between groups of respondents. And this could be anything. It could be any demographic. It could be usage patterns, how often they golf, anything like that. It also gives us standard errors. We can look at details by segment. So I can see overall, here's the females. Here's what the shares of preference were. Here's it broken out by standard errors and confidence intervals. So I can see how different these groups are by looking at the shares and then looking at the confidence intervals around those shares. So it's very useful digging into your data and figuring out, hey, are there different needs within segments? And how can we meet those needs? So then I could come back up here and I could play around with this and say, okay, well, let's optimize a golf ball just for our female golfers. And what do female golfers want? Given these other competitive products that are already on the market, how can we appeal to female golfers and get them to purchase more of our product? If you wanted to, there's a lot of other tools up here, so we can look at individual results. So when I click on simulate, it runs the same simulation, but now I've got a tab down here where I can look at the results by individual. So in this case, ID number 239496 was a male. Here's what they thought about the golf balls. The next one was also a male. Here's what they thought. So here's a female that really, really didn't like long, or was very unlikely to purchase long shot or high flyer or Eclipse, very likely to walk out of the store without anything. So maybe they prefer another brand. Maybe they're very price sensitive. We don't know. Maybe they just don't golf very often, so the chance is that she would walk out without anything. So that's just a simple way to use the simulator. We can also play what-if games. So we could come in here to Eclipse and we could say, okay, well, we know what the performance was at 5 yards. Here, let me turn off individual results. Let me turn back off the segments here. I know what my results were with 5-yard performance. I can look down here and say, okay, well, overall, Eclipse gathered 23% of the share. But what happens if it's at 10 yards? How do we do that? So we were at 23%. Now we click simulate, runs very quickly. Just by going from 5 yards to 10 yards now, all of a sudden we've jumped from 21% to 37% of the share. Now if we go up to 15 yards, click simulate again, we can see that the best we could probably do is 43% of the share. Now you can do this by making a change, clicking simulate, seeing the result, or if you're doing this type of just what if, here let's change one thing, see what happens, you can toggle this button here to auto, and then if I change it back to say 10, it automatically will run the simulations and give me the results without me having to click on the simulate button over and over again. The way that we have this project set up, we also can go into performance, and instead of doing just 5, 10, and 15, which are the levels that we measured, so we measured 5 yards, 10 yards, 15, we've also set these up so that they correspond to a numeric value. And the software is smart enough to be able to know that if I put in a 7 here, it should look at the utility for 5 and the utility for 10 and just draw a line between those two and figure out what the 7 would be. So this is called linear interpolation. And so we can look at any number of performance variables or price variables within the range that we tested in our experiment. So in performance, I can look at 5 yards to 15 yards, any number in between those, even fractions. And for price, I can look at anything from $4.99 to $10.99 and see what would happen as we change the price. One nice way to do this automatically is that within my scenario settings, I have a range behavior function. And right now it's set to sensitivity. So instead of typing in just a 5 or a 6 or a 7, if I want to look at what happens at all performance levels and see that graphed out, I can come in here and instead of typing in a 7 or a 5 and then a 10 and then a 15 and having to keep track of what those numbers are, I can type in equals range, kind of like you would in Excel. We've got a function called range, and the first thing we're going to type in is the start, which is going to be a 5, and it's going to go to 15. So that's our range that we want to look at. And I can say, let's look at every 1 yard increment. So each yard farther that it drives, I want to know how the eclipse ball will perform. So there's my function now. So now instead of looking at one number, I'm actually looking at 11 numbers. And I've got this auto turned on, so it automatically runs. It's going to run 11 simulations, 1 for 5, 1 for 6, 1 for 7, on and on until 15. And here's our results. So as we go from 5 to 6, we gain 2 percentage points, another 2 going from 6 to 7, another 3-ish going from 7 to 8, another 3-ish going from 8 to 9. So you can see here over on the right-hand side, we've got the performance graphed out. So we can see exactly how our respondents would have reacted to these different performance characteristics given the competition that we have set up here. So we started out at 23% and we end up at 43.8% at 15. You can see that it kind of tails off here. So going, the longer balls don't necessarily give you much impact. You get more of an impact from this 5 to 10 range. And, a lot of it comes from this 8 to 10 part of the spectrum. Okay, that's sensitivity analysis. And you can run sensitivity analysis on multiple attributes. So I could come in here and define a range for eclipse for price as well. And I could even have it set up so I was looking at the sensitivity analysis for multiple products at the same time. Okay, all right. Now, along with this range function, I can also, we got range behavior up here where we're looking at sensitivity analysis. I can change this to do a search instead. And so I'm going to switch it to an exhaustive search. And actually, let me cancel out of this. I want to turn off the auto run feature here. And I'm going to put in a range here for price as well. So I'm going to say equals range. And then I'm going to go from $4.99 to $10.99 at 50-cent increments. And let's let's actually go back to the home tab. And the obvious answer is that people will want the ball that has the highest performance at the lowest possible price. And so it's interesting to see that and see what the shares are. What's more interesting is to find out, what's next after that, or maybe which ball would make me the most money. So there's an option in here under revenues and costs where I can go in and say, okay, well, my market size, just to make the numbers look reasonable. We're not going to predict actual market here. This is just looking at preferences. But let's say there's 10,000 golf balls sold per month through pro shops in a certain area. Now I can come into the cost tables here, and I can say, let's add cost per attribute level. So, brand doesn't cost me much. Performance, though, costs me money. So if I want to make a ball that drives 5 yards farther than the average ball, the incremental cost, maybe that's my baseline, so it doesn't cost me anything extra. But driving 10 yards farther, the technology or, maybe the rubbers that we use in those types of balls cost a little bit more. And so maybe this costs, 50 cents per sleeve of balls. And 15 yards farther, maybe that's much more difficult to achieve. And so maybe that costs $1.10 more. So as we're looking for what's the ideal product now, we're actually saying, hey, if you can't make $1.10 more making it a 15-yard ball, then it's probably not worth it because we're going to be losing more money on the manufacturing costs than we made on the additional profitability in the market. So we put in these incremental costs. There's some tools here for price and cost checking, etc. And we can do a search here. Now, right now, I'm just in demo mode, so this isn't going to work very well for me. But if you're in the full mode, then it would allow you to do that. Actually, let me switch modes here so I can do that. Revenues and costs, cost table. Let me add that back in again. Performance. Okay. Okay, so we had said 0, 0.5, and 1.1. Okay. All right, so now when we go in here to the scenario settings and we say, hey, let's do an exhaustive search, it's going to look through all possible combinations of these ranges at 1 yard increments and these prices at 50-cent increments. We can go into the settings here for that search, and we can say, hey, we want to look at shares of preference, but we also want to optimize on profitability. We want to find the highest share that we can, but also the most profitability. And so it's going to simultaneously look for those two things. So we're going to click on Simulate now. Now it's going to run hundreds of simulations. So it's got 143 possible combinations it can look at now. And it's going to zip through those pretty quickly, much quicker than I could do it by hand. And it's going to come out with results that show us what the top products are, and it'll rank them by share of preference and by profitability along what's called an efficient frontier. So in finance, this is something that came from finance and from engineering. There's an efficient frontier where maybe you don't get the optimal share of preference and the optimal revenue or profitability, but you can get some that are very close to the optimal on both of those, but that push the revenue and the profitability out beyond what you'd normally get with either one of them on its own. So what we'll see is a combination of those two things. Now, while this is running, I'm going to say that there's a lot of other things that you can do with the simulator. If you look up above here at some of the area that's grayed out there, you can adjust your simulator for things like product availability. So I can go in, a lot of times these choice simulators don't match market shares because we haven't accounted for the fact that certain products or certain brands are available in a lot of stores, whereas other products are only available in certain channels. And so the simulator can be set up to apply product availability. So I can say, hey, these products in my simulation are available in 100% of the stores, whereas these other ones are only available in 50% of the stores. I can even tie it to specific stores. So I can say, hey, Walmart carries these brands, Target carries these brands, and Amazon carries both of the brands. And so I can set things up so that if you shop at Amazon and Target, I run the simulation. So those are the stores that are available to you, and the products that are available on Amazon and Target are shown in the simulator for you. Whereas people that only shop at Walmart only get simulated shopping in the products that are at Walmart. You can also apply product awareness. You can do some share adjustment stuff to compensate for things like advertising, sales force effectiveness, things like that. Okay, our simulation is run. We've done this exhaustive search, and it's come back and it said that the best product that we could do gets us 43% of the market. Our profitability, so if we take the amount that we were able to sell it for minus the amount that it cost us to produce, our profitability is $1.70, and that is a 15-yard ball at $4.99. Then it goes down from there, so we can see that we've got different prices here. So the next ball is actually a 15-yard ball at $5.49. Next one's $5.99. So they're not necessarily obvious ones. It's got like the top 100. Actually, I think it's got all 140 some odd. Nope, it's got top 100 cases in here, so we can look through them to see what are the best ones. And you can see here that we've graphed out all of these results here. These blue lines here, these blue answers, those are on what's called an efficient frontier. And so these are the best possible combinations we can get of share of preference and profitability. And so, if you're looking for the most profitable products, you want to look out here on this efficient frontier. Okay, last thing I want to show you is something called a utility report. Now, we typically don't like to spend too much time looking at average utilities and average importances. We find that it's much better to spend the time running simulations and seeing how things shake out from the simulator end of things, because that allows you to factor in, which products are on the market and what the prices are of those products. But there is a way that you can look easily at the utilities from your conjoint. So we're going to click on this utility report, and it actually comes up with an interactive tool that we can use to look at the utilities and importance scores for our study. So in this case, across all of our respondents, price was the most important attribute, followed by brand, followed by performance. We can see a report over here giving the box plots for High Flyer Pro, Magnum Force, Eclipse, and Long Shot to give kind of the range of utilities for each of those. So there's the mean, there's the 50%, there's the range. You can look at these things as box plots. You can also look at histograms. So here's High Flyer Pro's histogram. So, there are a few people that had very negative utilities for High Flyer Pro. Again, not that it's necessarily a negative brand. It's just that they had, strong preferences the other direction for some of the other brands. But the majority of the people were in this positive utility range, meaning that it was more likely to be selected than some of the other brands. So if I look, I can do a similar thing for Long Shot, which is the less preferred brand on average. And you can see there that there's not a lot of people that have high positive scores for it, but a lot of people that have these very high negative scores for it. So it's another way that you can look at your data. If you have clients that are interested in looking at the utilities and the importances, it's a good way to get these charts out. You can save these charts, put them into Excel, put them into your PowerPoints, etc. Okay, so that concludes our brief look at the conjoint Sawtooth Software Choice Simulator. We thank you so much for going on this brief tour with us today. For more information on the Choice Simulator, contact us at 801-477-4700 or email our support team to set up a personalized demo. They can be reached either at sales@sawtoothsoftware.com or support@sawtoothsoftware.com. There's also great information available to you in our tech support library here at sawtoothsoftware.com. And we thank you again for taking this time to view the simulator, and we hope to hear from you soon. Bye-bye.